My husband raised his champagne glass in front of the entire executive team and said, "To the woman who finally understands what it means to stand beside a powerful man." The woman beside him smiled like she had won something. Then he looked across the room at me, standing near the dessert table in a simple black dress, and added, "Some people spend their whole lives close to power and still never learn what to do with it." People laughed politely because they thought I was just his quiet, tired wife. They did not know the company he had been bragging about belonged to me. Welcome back to another anonymous confession, the kind people usually share when silence has become heavier than the betrayal itself. Before we get into tonight's story, I want to ask you something.
If someone humiliated you for years because they thought you had no power, would you expose them the moment you could? Or would you wait until they destroyed themselves in front of everyone? Because I waited. My name is not important, but for this story, you can call me Elena. I am 38 years old, and until 6 months ago, most people who knew my husband believed I was lucky to be married to him. His name was Ethan. He was charming in that polished, effortless way that makes people trust a man before he has earned it. Nice watch, easy smile, good handshake. The kind of man who remembered names when it helped him and forgot promises when they became inconvenient. Ethan was vice president of operations at a logistics technology company called Veilbridge Systems. At least, that was the title everyone knew. What they did not know was that I owned the controlling share of Veilbridge through a private holding company I had built quietly over several years. Ethan did not know either. I know that sounds impossible, but power is not always loud. Sometimes the loudest man in the room is only standing there because someone quiet signed the checks. Ethan and I had been married for 11 years. When I first met him, I thought he was safe. I was working nights at a medical billing office, taking online classes, and trying to keep my life together after my mother died. My father remarried quickly after my mom passed. His new wife, Marlene, never liked me. She did not scream or throw things. She did something worse. She made cruelty sound like advice. "Elena, at some point you have to stop acting wounded and start becoming useful."
Useful. That word followed me for years. My younger half-sister Bree was the golden child. She had the right degree, the right clothes, the right friends, and the kind of confidence people get when they are raised believing every room already has a chair waiting for them. I was the one who showed up late to family dinners because of work. I was the one who brought grocery store flowers. I was the one people described as trying her best, which is just a polite way of calling someone disappointing. One Thanksgiving, I brought a homemade pie because I could not afford anything better. The crust cracked on the bus ride over. Bree looked at it and laughed. Marlene said, "Sweetheart, nobody expects presentation from Elena." My father did not laugh. He just looked down and kept carving the turkey.
That silence hurt more than the insult. Ethan was there that year. We'd only been dating a few months. Under the table, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Ignore them." I thought that meant he saw me. Looking back, I think he saw how grateful I was for the smallest amount of protection. When Ethan proposed, I cried because I thought I had finally found someone who would stand in my corner. He told me, "You won't have to fight so hard anymore. I'll take care of us." And for a while, I believed him. When he interviewed at Veilbridge, I helped him prepare. I edited his resume, I made his presentation slides. I researched the company, practiced answers with him, and stayed up until midnight helping him sound more confident than he felt. When he got the job, he picked me up in our tiny kitchen and said, "We did it." That was the last time he said we. After that, it became his job, his promotion, his future, his pressure. And then it became my responsibility to make sure nothing at home interrupted his greatness. Let me know in the comments, if someone keeps shrinking you in public and calling it affection, how long would it take you to stop correcting them and start believing they want people to misunderstand you? Ethan's cruelty was not dramatic at first. He did not call me names directly. He joked. When people asked what I did, he said, "Elena handles little back office things. She's happiest when life is simple." If I corrected him and said I worked in compliance analytics, he would laugh and kiss my temple. She gets embarrassed when I brag about her. And suddenly, I looked like the difficult one. The moment everything began to change happened at the Veilbridge leadership dinner 5 years ago. Ethan had just been promoted to senior director. He wanted me there, but only as decoration. During dinner, the CEO at the time, Martin Hale, asked a question about a vendor contract that was causing delays. I answered without thinking. I said the company was overpaying for bad routing software, and that if the contract renewed automatically, they would be trapped for another 3 years. The table went quiet. Martin looked at me and asked, "How do you know that?" Before I could answer, Ethan laughed. "She reads too many of my emails over my shoulder," he said. "Ignore her. She likes feeling involved." Everyone smiled awkwardly. No one defended me. In the car, Ethan exploded. "Don't ever embarrass me like that again." I stared at him. "Embarrass you? I answered a question. You made it look like I go home and gossip about work with my wife." "I helped you review that file last weekend." "That's exactly the problem," he snapped. "You always make everything about yourself." That night, something inside me did not break. It cooled. I stopped asking Ethan to see me. I started seeing myself. A month later, Martin Hale called me privately. He said he kept thinking about my comment at dinner and asked if I would consult on a small compliance audit. Quietly. Paid. I almost said no. Then I visited Ruth. Ruth was an older woman who had lived in my childhood apartment building. She had been my mother's friend, and after my mom died, Ruth became one of the few people who still treated me like I mattered. When I told her about Martin's offer, she poured terrible coffee into 2 chipped mugs and said, "Elena, never confuse being underestimated with being unqualified. Sometimes people don't see you because you are standing behind someone who needs the spotlight too badly." So I said yes. I worked at night after Ethan fell asleep. I used my maiden name professionally. I reviewed contracts, flagged compliance risks, built reports, and sent clean, detailed recommendations. That first audit became another project, then another. Martin introduced me to investors who specialized in turning around struggling companies. I learned procurement, debt structure, vendor negotiation, corporate compliance, and the boring machinery behind real power. Nothing happened overnight. I was exhausted for years. There were nights I ate cereal over the sink because I was too tired to cook. There were mornings Ethan looked at my face and said, "You look rough. Maybe try a little harder today." There were times I nearly quit because hiding your growth from the person sleeping beside you is its own kind of loneliness. But Ruth kept reminding me, some people call you small because they are terrified of what happens when you stand up. I wrote that on a sticky note and kept it inside my laptop case. If stories like this keep you watching until the truth finally comes out, make sure you're subscribed, because this is the part where Ethan thought he was climbing higher, when really, he was standing on a floor I had built beneath him. 2 years after Martin first hired me, Veilbridge started falling apart. The company had expanded too quickly. Their contracts were bloated. A major client was threatening to leave. The founder wanted out. Martin called me into a private meeting with 2 investors and said, "Elena, you understand this company better than half the executives inside it." I thought he was being kind. He was not. Over the next 18 months, through a holding company called Larkmere Equity, I helped negotiate a recapitalization. I invested almost everything I had saved, along with money from 2 partners who trusted my analysis. I signed papers with shaking hands. When the deal closed, Larkmere owned the controlling interest in Veilbridge. And because of how Larkmere was structured, I controlled Larkmere. The public announcement simply said Veilbridge had received strategic investment from a private ownership group. Ethan read the press release at breakfast and said, "Finally, maybe real leadership will clean up the mess above me." I looked at him over my coffee. Maybe. He had no idea real leadership was sitting across from him in sweatpants. I did not tell him for 2 reasons. The first reason was business. My role needed to stay confidential during restructuring. The second reason was personal. I wanted to know who Ethan was when he believed I had no power. I got my answer. He got worse. After the investment, Ethan was promoted to Vice President of Operations. I approved it, partly because he had experience, and partly because I wanted to see whether real responsibility would make him better. It did not. He started calling Veilbridge my company at dinner parties. He bought new suits. He told my father he was basically carrying the transition. Marlene looked at him like he had saved civilization. My father once said, "Elena, you must be proud. Not every woman gets to marry a man with real influence." I said, "No, not every woman does." Nobody understood what I meant. Then came Ava. Ava was 29, newly hired in client relations, ambitious, pretty, and deeply impressed by Ethan. I do not blame her for every part of what happened. Ethan lied to her too. But she knew enough to enjoy being chosen over another woman, and that part I will not excuse. I found out because Ethan got careless. One Saturday, his phone lit up while he was in the shower. It was face up on the bed while I was folding laundry. A message preview appeared. Ava, I hate that we have to hide until your divorce is final.
You deserve someone who supports your power, not a wife who lives off it. My hands went numb, then another message came. Ava, when you become CEO, I want to be standing beside you. Not her. I stood there holding one of Ethan's shirts while the shower ran. Divorce? CEO? Lives off it? When Ethan came out, he saw the phone in my hand. For half a second, his face changed. Then he smiled, like I was the one caught doing something wrong. You're reading my messages now? I asked. Who is Ava? He sighed, not panicked, annoyed. She's someone who respects me. Not, I'm sorry. Not, it meant nothing. Someone who respects me. I asked, does she know you're married? She knows this marriage is over emotionally. That's interesting, I said, because nobody told me. He rolled his eyes. Elena, don't make this dramatic. He had been sleeping with an employee, lying about our marriage, promising her a future, and somehow I was dramatic? Then he said the sentence that ended whatever was left between us. You need to be realistic. You were never going to become anything on your own. I gave you this life. Don't embarrass yourself trying to fight me. I looked at him, and for the first time in 11 years, I did not feel small. I felt done. I did not scream. I did not throw his clothes outside. I did not call Ava. I called my lawyer on Monday morning. Her name was Denise Patel. She had handled my ownership documents from the beginning. I told her about the affair, the messages, and Ethan's belief that he was about to become CEO. When I finished, she said, do you want a divorce, or do you want a lesson? I said, both, but in that order. The catalyst came 3 weeks later. Valebridge was hosting a leadership reception at a downtown hotel to celebrate a major contract renewal. Ethan believed the event was his unofficial coronation. He had been telling people the board was considering him for CEO. He had even told Ava he planned to announce his separation from me soon and marry her once the optics settled. I knew this because Ethan saved Ava's voice messages. He liked replaying admiration. One of them said, I can't wait until everyone knows. You're the most powerful man in that company. People should see who you chose. That one hurt. Not because she loved him, because he had built a fantasy where I was the weak wife he had outgrown, and she believed it because it made her feel powerful too. The reception was held in a hotel ballroom with gold lights, white tablecloths, and just enough champagne to make arrogant people careless. Executives were there, board members were there, clients were there. Ethan also invited my father, Marlene, and Bree. Of course he did. He wanted witnesses. On the drive over, Ethan looked at my dress and said, You're wearing that? It was simple, black, and elegant. He would have recognized the designer if Ava had worn it. Yes? He smirked. Try not to look uncomfortable tonight. These are important people. I know exactly who they are. He thought I was being obedient. Inside, Ava stood near the bar in a red dress. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up. Then she saw me, and the light dimmed. Ethan put his hand on my lower back, not lovingly, performatively. Ava walked over anyway. You must be Elena, she said. Ethan has told me so much about you. There are sentences that sound polite until you hear the blade. I said, Has he? Ethan cleared his throat. Ava works in client relations. Very promising. Ava smiled. Ethan is an incredible mentor. He sees potential in people most others overlook. I looked at him. That does sound like Ethan. His eyes narrowed slightly. Dinner began. Speeches followed. The CFO thanked the leadership team. A board member talked about Valebridge's new era. Ethan kept checking his phone, probably waiting for confirmation of the announcement he thought was coming. What he did not know was that the board had already voted. There would be a new executive chair and interim CEO. It would be me. Denise was in the room. So was Martin Hale. Ruth was too ill to attend, but before I left, she had squeezed my hand and said, Not loud, straight. Halfway through dessert, Ethan stood without being asked. That was always Ethan's weakness. He could not let a spotlight pass him. He tapped his glass with a knife. The room quieted. I hope nobody minds, he said, smiling, but I wanted to say a few words. The CFO looked confused. One board member stiffened.
Ethan kept going. Valebridge has been through change, hard change. And change requires leadership. Real leadership. The kind that steadies a company when others get emotional, distracted, or overwhelmed. His eyes flicked toward me. My father chuckled softly. Ethan lifted his glass toward Ava. And personally, I'm grateful for people who recognize strength when they see it. People who stand beside power instead of resenting it. Ava blushed. Then Ethan looked directly at me and said, "Some people spend their whole lives close to power and still never learn what to do with it." A few people laughed. Enough people. That old Thanksgiving feeling tried to rise in me. The cracked pie, Marlene's smile, my father's silence. The room deciding I was too small to defend. But I was not that woman anymore. I stood. Not fast, not dramatically, just stood. Ethan blinked. "Elena, sit down." There it was, the old command. Don't embarrass us. Be honest in the comments. Would you have revealed the truth right there? Or would you have waited until they embarrassed themselves first? Because by then, Ethan had done most of the work for me. I picked up my clutch and walked to the small stage where the microphone stood. Ethan laughed nervously. "Honey, this isn't the time." I turned back to him. "You're right," I said. "The time was 5 years ago, when you told a room full of executives I liked feeling involved. It was 3 weeks ago when you told me I was nothing without you. Tonight is just the first time you have to hear the truth, with witnesses." The ballroom went silent. Ava's face changed. Ethan's smile hardened. "Elena, stop." I reached into my clutch and pulled out one folded page. Not the whole file, just the ownership summary. My secret weapon was not only that page. It was years of contracts, emails, approvals, equity agreements, transfer records, and board minutes. It was proof that while Ethan was performing power, I had been building it. I unfolded the document. "For those of you who do not know me professionally," I said, "my name is Elena Whitman. Some of you know my work under Elena Arden." Martin Hale smiled from the front table. A murmur moved through the room. I continued. "I am the managing partner of Larkmere Equity, the ownership group that acquired controlling interest in Valebridge Systems." Someone gasped. Ethan's face went pale. "As of this morning's board vote," I said, "I have been appointed executive chair and interim CEO of Valebridge." Ava turned toward Ethan so quickly her earrings swung. Ethan whispered, "That's not true." Denise stood from her table. "It is." He looked at her. "Who are you?" "My attorney," I said. "You'll be hearing from her again." Ethan's anger came back fast because humiliation was the only emotion he knew how to turn into action. "You set me up." "No," I said. "I let you speak." That landed harder than yelling. Ava stood slowly. "Ethan, what is she talking about?" He did not answer. So I did. "He told you he was separated from me. He told you he was going to become CEO. He told you he was the most powerful man in the company." Ava looked like she might be sick. I turned back to Ethan. "You called me worthless while building your reputation on work I did in silence. You called me dependent while spending a salary approved by a board I controlled. You called me close to power because you never imagined I might be the source of it." My father stood halfway. "Elena, maybe this should be handled privately." I looked at him. "No," I said. "You taught me what private silence costs." He sat down. Marlene looked furious. Bree looked stunned. Ethan stepped toward the stage. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said. "That was always your problem. You thought respect meant someone had to be above someone else. I wanted a marriage where I didn't have to shrink so you could feel tall." His jaw tightened. I continued. "Effective immediately, you are being placed on administrative leave pending review for ethics violations, misuse of authority, and failure to disclose a relationship with a subordinate." Ava flinched. I looked at her. "You will be interviewed separately. I suggest you tell the truth." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Ethan laughed once, ugly and sharp. "You can't do this. Family helps family." I almost smiled. "Ethan," I said, "I didn't abandon this family. I stopped financing my own humiliation." No one moved. Then Martin Hale stood. "This company survived," he said, "because Elena saw what louder people missed. Some of us should have said that sooner." It did not fix everything, but it mattered. Ethan looked around for allies.
No one came. Ava stepped away from him. My father stared at the floor. Marlene looked into her wine. For the first time since I had known him, Ethan stood in a room full of people and had no borrowed power left. After that, everything became quiet and chaotic at the same time. Denise guided me away from the microphone. The board announced a short recess, which is corporate language for everyone pretend not to gossip while absolutely gossiping. Ethan followed me into the hallway. His face was red now. "You ruined me," he said.
I looked at the man I had loved, or thought I loved, and felt grief instead of victory. "No," I said. "I revealed you. There's a difference." He lowered his voice. "Elena, listen. We can fix this. You were angry. I get it. You had an affair with an employee. It wasn't like that. You lied to her. She came on to me. You humiliated me. You embarrassed me first by hiding all of this." And there it was again. Even my success was an offense because he had not been allowed to own it. "I filed for divorce this morning," I said. He froze. "The papers will be delivered tomorrow. You need to move out of the house by Friday." His mouth opened. I added, "It is in my name. It has been for 4 years." Behind him, my father stepped into the hallway. "Elena," he said softly. I braced myself for guilt. Instead, he looked old. I didn't know. I believed him, but not knowing had been a choice, too. "You didn't ask," I said. His eyes filled with tears. "I should have protected you more." "Yes," I said. "You should have." Marlene appeared behind him, tight-lipped. "This is a cruel way to treat your husband." I looked at her for a long moment. "When I was 25, you said nobody expected presentation from me. Tonight, I presented the truth. I'm sorry it wasn't wrapped nicely enough for you." Bree made a small sound, almost like a laugh, then covered her mouth. Marlene said nothing else. Ava came out last. Her mascara was smudged under one eye. She looked younger than she had in the ballroom. "I didn't know you were still together," she said. "I know you didn't know everything," I said. "But you knew enough to enjoy feeling chosen over another woman." She swallowed. "I'm sorry. I hope someday you mean that for yourself, too." She nodded and walked away. The fallout was not magical. Ethan hired an attorney and tried to claim I had hidden marital assets. That did not go well for him because Denise had built every wall properly from the beginning. His employment review uncovered messages, favoritism, expense misuse, and retaliation against 2 employees who had questioned him. He resigned before termination became public. Ava left the company. I heard later she moved closer to her sister and started over. I do not hate her. I hope she learned that being chosen by a liar is not the same as being loved. My father called several times. I answered once. He cried. I cried after hanging up. Not because I forgave him, but because some grief arrives years late and still expects a chair. I told him I needed distance, not punishment, protection. Ruth passed away 2 months after the reception. The night before she died, I sat beside her bed and told her everything. She smiled with her eyes closed and whispered, "Straight." That was the last advice she gave me. I am still learning how to live without proving myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. Some mornings, I wake up angry. Some nights, I miss the version of Ethan I thought was real. Healing is strange that way. You can be free and still mourn the prison because you decorated it for years. But I do not shrink anymore. I do not laugh at jokes made at my expense. I do not accept love that requires my silence as rent. And I do not confuse being useful with being valued. If you have ever had to walk away from people who only loved you when you were easy to control, leave a comment. Someone reading it might need to know they are not cold, selfish, or cruel for choosing peace. The last time I saw Ethan was in a courthouse hallway. He looked tired, smaller somehow. He asked if I was happy now. I thought about the ballroom, the champagne glass, Ava's red dress, my father's silence, Ruth's sticky note inside my laptop case. Then I said, "I'm not happy because you lost everything. I'm peaceful because I stopped losing myself." I walked away before he could answer. And that is the part nobody tells you about power. The best kind is not making people regret underestimating you. It is finally understanding that you never needed their permission to become someone they could not reach.